or chain. The federal government developed a conspiracy type statute. It's really a racketeering statute, but you can think of it as almost a conspiracy statute, known as RICO, the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. RICO was mainly directed at organized crime and tried to figure out how we could actually punish organized criminals for their involvement in various crimes, because most likely they're conspiring to commit those offenses. Under RICO is a very long statute, and we're not going to cover all of it. We're just going to take a quick look at it right now. But under RICO, there are 4 ways that you can commit an offense. You can use a pattern of racketeering activity to acquire an interest in a business. So let's clarify a couple terms here. A pattern of racketeering activity is defined under the law as 2 or more offenses occurring within a 10-year period from a list of offenses that are in the RICO statute. Things like murder, rape, arson, extortion, prostitution, drug trafficking, pretty much anything we can think of that may be associated with organized crime. If you commit 2 or more of these offenses within a 10-year period, you can be guilty of a RICO violation. And so if you use that racketeering activity to acquire an interest in a business, so think of a movie, some of the mob movies, where the mobsters go in and tell a scared restaurant owner, we're going to kill you unless you give us your business. Make us partners in your business. And so they're using racketeering activity, extortion, murder, attempted murder, to acquire an interest in that business. The owner of the business isn't giving it over voluntarily and freely. A second way that you can violate RICO is if you use money from a pattern of racketeering activity to invest in a business. So if you take the profits that you've made from your drug dealing, from your loan sharking, whatever it may be, and you use that money to invest in a business, to buy a part of a business or some other legal enterprise, then you're guilty of violating RICO. Thirdly, if you use a business to carry out a pattern of racketeering activity, so maybe you have an auto garage. You use that garage for legitimate repairs of cars, but also you use it to carry out a stolen parts ring, which would be racketeering activity. So you have people stealing cars, they bring them to your garage after hours, you strip them down and sell the parts. That would be using a business to carry out a pattern of racketeering activity. The final way that you can be guilty of RICO is if you actually conspire. So if you get together with other people to commit any of the previous 3 violations under RICO, then you are also guilty of conspiracy to commit a RICO. There are limitations on conspiracy. Many critics hate conspiracy because they believe that the prosecutor can abuse the law by throwing conspiracy charges at almost anyone. They call it conspiracy the darling of the prosecutor, because in addition to any other crimes you may charge, if there's more than one person involved, you can charge a conspiracy. But again, sometimes this conspiracy statute may be abused by prosecutors because they'll charge people who are very loosely connected with the conspiracy and may not even be really very aware that there is a conspiracy. Or they'll charge someone for the acts of a conspirator. So you're conspiring with someone to rob a bank. You keep stressing that no one should be killed during the bank robbery, but your co-conspirator goes out, your partner goes out and kills somebody while you're while you helped in planning the armed robbery, the bank robbery. You may not even been at the scene. You may have been just the person who was who gave inside information on the bank and wanted to share in the profits. But we assume that you intended all actions of your co-conspirators, even though in many jurisdictions we've gotten rid of that old notion, and we said that it must be something that you could have foreseen, something that you could have expected. Under conspiracy, as we started to say with this slide, there are limitations. The Wharton Rule is one of the principal limitations. It says that we cannot charge someone with conspiracy when the actual underlying crime, the substantive crime, by its very definition requires two people. And these were the only two people involved in the crime, so there weren't additional people helping out. It was only the two people who were involved who are going to be charged with conspiracy. Under the Wharton Rule, they cannot be charged. So what kind of crimes, by their very definition, required two or more people? Well, things like some sexual crimes. Fornication used to be the crime against against sex among married people. So, I apologize, sex between unmarried people. So if you had two single people having sex, something that you wouldn't even blink an eye at today, but if two single people were having sex, that used to be a crime. The only sex that was protected under the law, that was allowed under the law, was sex in a marriage between the husband and wife. So fornication, by its very definition, requires two actors. And so therefore we can't charge conspiracy when we only have the two actors. Now if you throw somebody else in the mix, someone who acts as the middle person who brings the two people together to commit fornication, then maybe yes, we could charge conspiracy. But if it's only the two actors, then that's it. The same goes for bigamy. So if bigamy requires three people, that you're married to two other people, we can't charge those three people, if that's all we have, with conspiracy. Incest likewise requires two people. Adultery, sex between people who are married but who aren't married to each other. So cheaters. Adultery used to be a crime, like fornication used to be. They're not now, but they used to be. So if two married people or one married person and a single person were caught having sex and they weren't married to each other, then they could not be charged. If they're the only ones apprehended, they could not be charged with adultery, because adultery requires two people in order for it to exist as a crime. The two or more rule says we must have at least two people for a conspiracy. So that sounds like the Wharton Rule, but it's a little bit different. It's different in that if we have conspirators charged together and tried in a single trial, and they're the only two people that we accuse of being involved in this conspiracy, if the jury comes back with a not guilty verdict on one and a guilty verdict on the other, we're going to overturn we're going to overturn that guilty verdict, because we must have at least two people, and the jury has said, well, we only have two people here, and one of those people we're going to find not guilty. So under the two or more rule, we must have both of those people convicted. Now that's not true if they have separate trials. If they have separate trials, different juries, and one conspirator is convicted and the other isn't, then we can still sustain the conspiracy conviction against the person who is found guilty. The corporation rule says that we can't charge conspiracy if the only actors are a corporation and one of its agents. Because a corporation can't act on its own, it has to have people who act for it. So if we have the corporation and just one of its agents, now if we involve more agents, then maybe a different story. But if it's only one agent, one employee, we can't charge the corporation with conspiracy. We can't say, well, we had the corporation and we had the human employee, then that must be a conspiracy because we have two parties now. No, because the employee is acting for the corporation. Finally, we have the abandonment and renunciation rules. So similar to attempt, if you abandon your plans, if you give up the conspiracy, then you may be able to claim that as a defense if someone charges you later. So that abandonment, like with attempt, must be voluntary. It's not because you found out that the police are on to you, but it must be on your own free will, your own free decision, unpressured, that you are going to abandon this plan. However, unlike attempt, where you're probably acting alone, abandonment under conspiracy is a little bit tougher, because not only do you have to abandon your plans, but you have to take action to make sure that the other conspirators don't go through with the crime either. So it's not just your abandonment, but you have to make sure that your co-conspirators also abandon their